What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for my 5 takeaways from week 1 of the 2022 college football season. I realize we still have a game tonight, Clemson, Georgia Tech. I will touch on that game when I do my top 25 video tomorrow. If there's anything, well, I'm sure I'll talk about Clemson unless they lose or something, but we'll talk about them tomorrow. I wanted to go ahead and get a video up with my takeaways from week 1. And what a week 1 it was. That's where we're going to start. This was probably the best week 1 of all time. I mean, we had so many great games. Last night, the finish of that game last night, that had to be one of the craziest finishes that I can remember in college football. So many turns, twists and turns in that game. It was just wild. But you can go all the way back to Thursday night. Pitt, West Virginia. What a finish in that game. How about Purdue and Penn State? That was a great game. Looked like Purdue was probably going to win it. Penn State came down with that big drive to close things out at the end to get the touchdown to win that game. I mean, those two games, Thursday night, that was just kind of getting us set for week 1 because it was just an awesome, awesome week 1. Friday night was kind of, well, we had the Old Dominion upset over Virginia Tech on Friday night. We'll talk about that a little bit more on another topic. We had Illinois and Indiana. That was a great game. So even Friday night, we had some great games. And then, of course, going into Saturday, Florida, Utah, the night game, that one was unbelievable. But even before that, there were some great games. NC State and East Carolina. How about that game coming down to a missed extra point? Just like the game last night, we saw North Carolina in just a crazy finish against App State. That was a really good game. Houston and UTSA going to, I think, was it 3 overtimes? That was a great game. Well, we just saw it over and over. Iowa and South Dakota State. Iowa scores 7 points, but no, they didn't get a touchdown. They got 2 safeties. I mean, that was insane. And their offense is awful, by the way, but the defense for them gives them a chance to be pretty good this year, I think, if the offense can come along. Rutgers, Boston College was a great game. I mean, you just go down the list. There were so many great games. And there is just so much parity in college football outside of those top few teams. And that's what I want to get to next. I'm just kind of scrolling through the rest of the games, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as the great games. And again, going back to Florida State, LSU, that one was insane last night. Just a crazy finish to that game. But that takes us really to my next point here, my next takeaway. And that's parity is at an all-time high. And I'm not talking about all the teams, but I'm talking about the teams behind those top few, those teams that are in that top tier. And I said this all offseason. How many times when I did a top 25 video would I say, look, I know these teams are at the top, but then after that, it is so hard to rank these teams because they're all just so even. I mean, anybody can beat anybody, and we saw that already. Not just in upsets, but games that were really close that we didn't think maybe were going to be all that close, or some people didn't. Nothing really surprised me from week 1. I picked Florida over Utah. I picked LSU, but I said Florida State has a chance. I said that's a toss-up game. I mean, they're just really what I thought that we were going to have a lot of close games in these games, and that's exactly what we got. Why is this? Why is this? Well, I think the transfer portal maybe is a big part of this. You've got guys that aren't getting playing time from some of the top teams, and they're going down to maybe that next tier of teams, and they're making that group of teams better. I mean, I don't know. It's just right now, you look at a lot of programs that have been struggling that are getting better and better and better, and you have other programs that maybe have had a chance to pull away and move into that top tier, and they just haven't done it just yet. And it's crazy how even college football is outside of those top few teams. I realize the top few teams are so much above everyone else, and that's why the playoff, we get so many blowouts in the first round of the playoff. It seems like every year, almost not every game, but most games in the semifinal round, we don't see a lot of great close games because we have a couple teams at the top. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But if this is any indication of what is to come, this is going to be a great season. Just looking at the SEC, if you look back to my preseason predictions, remember I picked Georgia and Alabama to run the table, and then I didn't have an SEC team finishing above 8-4 because I said these teams are all just even. There's so much parity, and that's really the story across college football. Look at Florida and Utah. Two teams that most people thought, well, Utah is the better team, and I realized they had to go on the road. But even on a neutral field, this was going to be a good game. I don't think Utah would beat Florida by a lot on a neutral field. They might win the game, but it was going to be a close game. If they played 10 times, I think, you know, it's going to be a pretty even series, even on a neutral field. Florida was better than I expected them to be. Anthony Richardson is the real deal, and we'll talk about them more on my top 25 video tomorrow. But again, the takeaway here is that there's a lot of parity, and there's going to be a lot of great games. This is going to be a fun college football season if week 1 is any indication. Number 3 takeaway, the ACC overall, it was overrated. And I realized Florida State did what they did last night. Florida State looks like a really solid team. I'm not talking about every team in the ACC. You're going to have some surprise teams, of course, that are better than we thought. But overall, it kind of seems like the teams in the ACC are not as good as maybe we thought they were. North Carolina struggling against App State. Pittsburgh barely beating West Virginia. Now, I think West Virginia is better than anticipated. I think this is going to be a good team. But still, Pittsburgh at home had to have a late interception there to win that game. Virginia Tech losing to Old Dominion. NC State barely beating East Carolina. We saw Boston College lose to Rutgers. Rutgers expected to be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Boston College expected to be a mid-tier team in the ACC. So we just saw this really across the ACC. How about Syracuse and Louisville, by the way? I mean, these were two ACC teams, but Louisville a big disappointment. And that was on my upset alert video. And what did I tell you? I said that game could totally mess my predictions up for the entire season for those two teams. And that's probably what's going to happen. Syracuse probably going to be better than I thought. Louisville, maybe not the surprise team that I thought that they were going to be. Same thing with Virginia Tech. I thought they had a chance to maybe be a surprise team. And maybe they still do. Maybe this was just a bad game for them. Old Dominion really fired up in this one, obviously. A huge game for them. But I would say that overall the ACC is not as good as we thought. Wake Forest doesn't have Sam Hartman right now, so they're not going to be as good as we anticipated in the back in the preseason. Where does Clemson fit in this? Well, we'll find out tonight. If the ACC is down, then Clemson's probably going to win this conference pretty easily. But what if Clemson's down? What if Clemson's not that great? What if they struggle to win the ACC, but they do win it? Let's say they go to the playoff, and then we find out that, wow, the ACC was not very good, and they get blown out. It's hard to say at this point. We've only had 1 week. But it does kind of, you get the feeling that the ACC is not as good as, I thought the ACC was really turning it around. I thought they were probably going to be maybe even the third best Power 5 conference. It would be debatable with them. And yeah, I would say coming into this year, I thought the ACC was going to be the third best Power 5 conference. We haven't learned much from the Big 12 yet. We'll find out more in the coming weeks. But again, Florida State, very interesting. Maybe a chance to take down Clemson. Pittsburgh, I still think is a good team, so I'm not saying the ACC is terrible. Just I don't think that they're quite as good as I thought they were, at least in the preseason. And another conference that's struggling, the Pac12, their playoff hopes are already pretty much gone. I'm not going to say they're out of it. They have no chance, but it's going to be tough, in my opinion, for a Pac12 team to make the playoff. And, of course, the two big stories were Oregon and Utah. And there are a lot of things still to happen. So let's say Florida, they could go 10-2, or they could have a great year. And then Utah, if they run the table, they're going to have a chance to make the college football playoff. They're not going to get penalized for going on the road in week 1 and losing to a top 10 Florida team potentially. But let's say Florida's 6-6 or 7-5. That's going to kill Utah. I mean, that's going to be rough. Oregon showing that they cannot compete with a team like Georgia. That does not help. Colorado got blown out in the second half against TCU. That's not going to help. UCLA was sloppy against Bowling Green. That's not going to help. Arizona beat San Diego State. That's actually some good news for the Pac-12. Washington State barely beat Idaho. Oregon State looked good against Boise State. Other teams kind of played some cupcakes. But, yeah, I think the perception for the Pac-12, just because of Oregon and Utah, is that they're just not ready to compete with the top teams in college football. They're not really going to have a playoff contender. USC, they have potential to maybe to run the table and be in that conversation. But I think that, Oregon, it's going to be tough to come back from that. Losing like that, it's going to be tough. Utah, again, they need Florida to be good, and they're going to have to win out. Utah cannot afford another loss. Same thing with Oregon. So it's very interesting with the Pac-12. I think it's going to be very tough for the Pac-12 to get a team into the college football playoff. All right, so let's talk about the big picture here with my number one takeaway, and that is that Alabama and Georgia appear to be in a league of their own. Maybe Ohio State's in that league, maybe they're not, and that is the really intriguing thing from week one. That's what I guess has my attention the most, because we know, all right, Alabama, I know it's Utah State, but this is still a Mountain West team, a pretty good Mountain West team. They completely dominated them. I mean, it was almost a perfect game from Alabama, both sides of the ball. This is the Alabama team that we thought they were going to be, and I don't care if it was Utah State. You can just tell by watching this team that they're going to be really, really, really good. And obviously Georgia. I mean, come on. It was ridiculous how good their defense was. I thought Oregon was going to hang around in this game. Georgia might be the best team. They have a legitimate chance to win it all again. You saw that. You saw the potential. The defense is, I mean, it didn't look like they took a step back at all. They have so many athletes, 5-star after 5-star after 5-star. Yes, they reloaded. I knew they would, but still thought they might take a bit of a step back. We'll see after they play, some more big games, some really good competition. It could turn out that Oregon's just not very good this year. But the offense, they have so many weapons on that side of the ball. Stetson Bennett can get it done. So underrated. Stetson Bennett is a very good college quarterback. I hate to hear everyone talk about him being like a bad quarterback. Stetson Bennett's a good quarterback. Georgia and Alabama, we know, are going to be right. I mean, I guess we could see an upset. Maybe one of them loses a game somewhere, but I feel like they're going to be in that college football playoff at the end of the year. I don't see either team losing a regular season game, at least based off of what I saw in week one. Obviously, things can change. You could have injuries. Another team could really step up. But based off of what we saw in week one, they look to be in a league of their own. Now, is Ohio State, this is the intriguing thing, is Ohio State in that top tier? Or are they in the next tier? It's hard to say based off of their performance against Notre Dame. Maybe they are in that top tier, and maybe Notre Dame's really close to that top tier. Or maybe Ohio State's kind of a bit behind Alabama and Georgia. Maybe they're more in that second tier with Michigan, and maybe Notre Dame is in that tier, and maybe you've got Clemson. Do they fall there? Possibly. Again, we haven't seen them yet, so it's hard to say. And that is what I'm really looking forward to finding out over the next few weeks about Ohio State. Is Ohio State going to be able to compete with Alabama and Georgia? Are they going to be a team in that top tier, or are they a little bit behind? I think they're if they're not in the top tier, they're in that second tier. Again, where I think Michigan is. I feel pretty confident in Michigan being there. Maybe Clemson, and again, maybe Notre Dame. Got to see some more football, obviously, to know all that for sure. But that is the big storyline for me coming out of week one. Ohio State's defense, yes, they look improved, but Notre Dame's not a very explosive offense. Let's just be honest about it. They're not a tough team to stop. I want to see Ohio State play a really high-powered offense, and then we'll find out for sure about that defense. But I'm concerned about the offense, or maybe it's Notre Dame's defense is just that good. We don't know after week one, and yes, we have some takeaways here, but a lot of these takeaways could be flawed because we just have such a small sample size. I always say this every year, give me 4 games. I want to see these teams for 4 games before we can really know the contenders and the pretenders and all that. But yeah, Alabama and Georgia, if they are in a league of their own, they're going to play twice. They're going to play in the SEC championship, and then they're going to play again in the national championship. And it's going to be the same story as last year. And no, I'm not enjoying that. No, I don't want to see that. You guys know I'm an Auburn fan. It's not fun seeing your 2 biggest rivals be the 2 best teams in college football. But it is what it is, and it feels like that might be the way it is again in 2022. We'll find out soon, hopefully, about Ohio State if they could possibly join that group. What were your big takeaways? What did you take away from week one? Again, I don't want to get into all the individual teams too much. We'll talk about the top 25 teams tomorrow when I do my top 25 video. But just looking at the big picture, definitely a great week one. A great week one. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in week 2. But, of course, we still have one more game tonight. Clemson versus Georgia Tech. I think the game will be not a 1-score game, but I think it'll be fairly close. I think Clemson will take care of business, though. They win it by 14 to 20 points. That's my prediction for tonight's game. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.